Now it's time to make the player jump. To start, we need to grab our grounded player Boolean value, and we're going to assign that to controller.isGrounded. Fortunately for us, the player controller component handles determining if our player is on the ground for us. That's actually normally a pretty complicated bit of code to write yourself, so it's very nice to have a component handle that for us. Now, if you remember, we have a player velocity variable. That's a vector3 component, or I'm sorry, a vector3 object. And what we want to check here is if our player is grounded and their y velocity, meaning their up and down velocity, is less than 0. So you see that you got the less than sign, it's less than 0. We want the player to stop moving. We don't want the player, if they're on the ground, to just fall through the earth. That's less than ideal. So in this block of code with our curly brackets there, we'll type player velocity.y and set it equal to 0. Secondly, we want to add another conditional statement, and this time we're going to actually press the button and make the player jump. So if our input get button down is, and for the value of jump, fortunately we have a button that's just assigned to the name of jump, very convenient, and by default that is set to your space bar. So if that button is down and our player is grounded, then we want to add to our player velocity's y value. So we'll say player velocity.y. We'll say plus equals to, which is the same as saying equals our player velocity.y plus a new value. We're going to say plus equals to a bit of complicated math here called math. We're going to be taking the square root of a value to create something that's a little more appropriate and a little bit more. So we're not jumping super high into the air, but we're also not jumping super low. We want to kind of get in a sweet spot where if we tweak the values a little bit, it won't have a massive effect on us. So what we're going to do is use mathf.sqrt, which represents square root, and we're going to take our jump height and multiply that by -3.0f. That f is important because it tells the code that we want to use everything in this block as a float, which if you see there, it says mathf.square root float f. Square roots only want to work with floats. They don't want to work with integers. And then we're going to multiply that by our gravity value. That way our gravity value has an effect on how high you're jumping as well as pulling you back down to earth. Finally, we are going to add the code to pull you back down to earth. So what we're going to do is say player velocity.y plus equals to gravity value times time.delta time. And you might be thinking, well, why aren't we subtracting from our y value? If we want to go down and y velocity being positive means we're going up, y velocity being negative meaning we're going down, why are we adding? Well, if you'll remember, gravity value is negative. So we're essentially subtracting the value of 75 times our time delta time from our player velocity in every frame. And we're not doing that inside a conditional because no matter what, the player is always affected by gravity. Even if they're not in the air, they're still feeling the effects, just like we are in real life. Finally, to make it so that this velocity is actually applied to our player, in our move line here, after speed, you'll hit space, add a plus sign, and then add player velocity times, again, our time.delta time. Make sure to hit save after you add that last little bit there. Again, Control-S, Command-S, or in the file dropdown. And then feel free to go play around with it. And in fact, at this point, I would encourage you to maybe mess with the values a little bit. To see what I mean, you can go back to the player here. And in our player script, you'll see all those variables we just referenced. Our jump height, our gravity value. Feel free to throw any number you want in there and see what happens. And experimentation is key. So please feel free to tweak that stuff, play with it, adjust the walk speed, mess around, have a little fun with it, and just really get familiar with the code that you're writing.